American Secession by F. H. Buckley, The Looming Threat of a National Breakup. Chapter 7, Bigness and the Military. Well, my friends, we are just over the halfway mark of the book, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying this content. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you're subscribing to all the notifications by hitting the little bell notification. That will help every time I release a new chapter. If you like the content that's being provided, please hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment. And most importantly, if you feel that this content would be valuable to somebody that you know, please share it, as that really helps with the algorithm. I'm really trying to get that word out about this book and about this chapter review, and hopefully build a community of people that are really understanding it and are interested in making some action towards it. So please do that if you haven't done so. And without further delay, here's your chapter. So Chapter 7, Bigness in the Military, hit home for me as a military veteran. I have found that this book has really hit a lot of chords for me, but none more so than this, because it really talks about the role of a large country and how their military works. And whether you've been in the military, the U.S. military or not, you probably understand that the United States military has operated as a world policeman for a very, very long time, specifically after the fall of the Soviet Union. And actually, probably even before that with the Cold War, after World War II. In any case, Buckley makes a point here of talking about how smaller governments have more modest foreign policy goals and have a tendency to not go off on foreign adventures. And while bigness, like in the United States, offers protection from attack, the large size of an army, a standing army, tempts countries to throw their weight around. And our founding fathers even talked about that. Standing armies are a threat to liberty, and sure enough, that has been seen with very large national defense budgets, astronomically high national defense budgets, in which many other non-liberty oriented legislation is often put into, since it gives people in the government cover to go ahead and vote for things under supporting the troops. One of the differences that he talked about was looking at, again, we come back to Finland, the small, as he said, the small, fragile country of Finland versus imperialistic France. There is a difference between how those countries relate to their people and how they relate to the world. And in the case of Finland, as an example, Finland has certainly had its problems with a large neighbor to the east, Russia, but pretty much stays outside of the world's problems. Whereas in France, when it was imperialistic and Napoleon, that was not the case at all. The American military has grown since then, and now as we are here today, we have over 2 million people in the armed forces, and we have a very, very large military budget. It dwarfs the military budgets of much of the world. 35% of the world's military spending is done by the United States government. That military spending has continued up until the present moment. And famously, in Dwight D. Eisenhower, general, and then later president, in his farewell address, he was very keen in making sure that people understood the dangers of what is now called the military-industrial complex, which is that the defense industry is linked together almost incestuously with the government. Military budgets that are often put out are done with the blessing of legislators that are getting huge kickbacks in terms of campaign funds or just other benefits. We have a $600 billion a year military budget, and half of the people receiving that $600 billion are defense contractors. So $300 billion going to private industry, military-oriented industry, defense contractors. There are 700 to 1,000 defense lobbyists working in the District of Columbia, with almost $1 billion in lobbying monies flowing to different politicians that are voting in favor of pro-military spending. And as a government contracting officer, former government contracting officer, I can attest, even in my little role and one little base, at one time, I, with a U.S. government credit card, was approached quite frequently on how to spend money on behalf, for the government. And it was only my own ethics that kept that from taking advantage of that in a bad way. So it is alive and well. I felt that very much myself as I was when I was serving. And when you think about weapon systems that could potentially be sold, well, even more so. Presidents can often take us to war, diverting attention from domestic affairs. And one of the most famous examples of that would be Bill Clinton on the eve of the Monica Lewinsky testimony decided to send missiles into Bosnia. That's unfortunate. And of course, it happens over and over again. You can almost think of almost every president at some point or another is going to start sending missiles somewhere, getting some deployment somewhere in order to divert from domestic affairs. Buckley talks about how parliamentary debate tends to curb those war efforts. And he actually referenced a study in there that showed that parliamentary governments are actually, you can prove it statistically, are less likely to go to war than governments that have a non-parliamentary style of government to debate those type of things. Animus dominandi, the desire to dominate. So with a bigger military and bigger spending comes the desire to dominate. And we have it. We have it today with that desire to dominate. Military glory is referenced in the chapter. And with that bigger military, there is a larger tax burden on the people. And of course, who suffers when all of those resources are going towards military spending and not towards better highways or a better healthcare system. And one can only look really around the United States to think about, wow, with a $600 billion military budget and a lot of foreign expeditions and 2 million people under arms, how could that money be redeployed in the United States in a way that would serve the people of America in a better way? And so Buckley mentioned that a small state usually generates a modest military. When you consider that had the United States broke up into a number of maybe 2 or 3 countries, as it wanted to do in 1861, the hypothetical of, let's say it was 2 or 3 smaller countries as opposed to the one big country, there probably would not have been a Vietnam and no Iraq war for sure. The impetus to constantly go to war, to constantly gin up reasons to go to war, to divert people, to create wealth in the military-industrial complex is a never-ending source of stress on a larger country. And then lastly, he gave a kind of example of California, the state of California, which has an active secession movement. California, in terms of funding, provides 1/8 of the military budget. California is a humongous economy that generates quite a bit of wealth to the United States government. And if California were to leave the United States, it would be a significant impact. And many people in California have believed that this is exactly why they should leave the United States. They're not getting a lot of bang for their, on their dollar. California, which now currently gives 1/8 of the U.S. military budget, had become an independent country and was spending at the levels of, like, let's say, Canada's military. California would save $87 billion a year. Can you imagine what that would look like in California? A state that is more left of center and certainly has lots of designs about curbing global warming and providing for its people more social orientation. Can you imagine what $87 billion of peace dividend would mean for the people of California? And that is the final argument that he makes in Chapter 7. Next time, we'll be jumping into Chapter 8 on our journey to the end of the book, where we'll be discussing bigness and freedom.